Welcome everyone to Insights number 13. I'm James, and today's subject is yet more unpublishable advice. And this is something that I've struggled to express in a generic manner for years at this point. Um, this is something you probably have run into where you just don't really know anymore at a certain point when to trust yourself versus when to doubt yourself. And this happens most often when you thought your gut told you to pick an answer and you picked it and it ended up being wrong, or your gut told you to pick an answer and you're like, oh, there's no way that could be right. And you pick the other one that was left and you happen to be wrong, and that seems to be random. You don't know what's going on. Hopefully, today's discussion is going to help you with that just a little bit. So, over my entire career of working with high scores, so mid 160s people looking to crack 170 plus, one thing I consistently hear from those mid 160s people is the ill effect of self doubt. You get down to the last two answers and maybe even pick the right one at first. But there's this nagging thought. It can't be this simple. I probably got something wrong, so on and so forth. It's all these thoughts that make you go for the other answer instead, which happens to be the incorrect one. As an instructor, my urge is to just be encouraging and cheerleader and say, hey, that's a good thing. Just trust yourself. But I know it's more complicated than that. Kind of like I said at the title slide, if it was just that easy, just trust yourself, if that was the answer, none of you would be here. I wouldn't be able to do this as sort of a business tutoring thing. Yeah, it's just obviously it can't be that simple. So, discussing how you can manage that line between trusting your instincts versus avoiding traps is the goal of today's video. So, I do want to make clear that for those of you guys who have been training on this thing for some time, um, there is merit to trusting yourself. It's all about figuring out how you can calibrate that sense to balance when your feelings are correct versus when your feelings are leading you astray. I do want to note that this process of of figuring out your instincts and that line, it could become fairly time and effort intensive. Therefore, I would recommend doing all this stuff only if you feel like you can spare the time and effort right now, or if you feel like that battle with trusting yourself is a fairly high priority issue for you. So let's start with the very first step that I recommend, step 1A. This is what I would just call the pro instinct status check because simply this is going to find out when instincts are good for you and when you should lean into them more. Um, and as I was just saying, that's the very first thing you want to figure out. How good are your instincts actually right now? For anyone stuck in the mid 160s, I believe this is not a mere matter of raw numbers of questions, right or wrong, where you followed your heart or you followed your gut and it led you astray. It's not just about the raw number of questions this happens on. Rather, you should ask yourself this. Anytime you wanted to choose the right answer, but sided against yourself and chose the wrong answer, investigate any correlation between that error and, for instance, an LR. Look at question type, if you were down to the last two answers, what kind of dilemma was it? Was it A said this that was uncomfortable, B said something else that was uncomfortable, so you're comparing stretches? Or was A just totally unfamiliar, whereas B, the one that you picked, had some things in it that turned out to be a trap. That kind of thing. Other things in the list include the subject matter of the stimulus. Is it science? Is it a survey? Is it math? Is it that kind of thing? Or is it a particular writing style, which I don't really know how to give those things names. I'm sure I could if I wanted to, but you've probably come to recognize certain patterns, and of course the list goes on. Any sort of pattern you can identify in terms of LR stimuli that lead you astray or answer choice wordings that lead you astray. All that stuff is fair game. You want to see if there's any sort of correlation between your I sided against myself and ultimately I picked the wrong answer because of it. You want to see if there's a correlation between that phenomenon and any sort of pattern you see in this section. In RC, it's going to be more or less the same thing as LR, except instead of uh, dealing with stimuli, you're going to have to apply that to passages. So the subject matter of the passage, writing style of the passage, that sort of thing. When it comes to LG, as much as I just want to jokingly say, hey, just wait it out, wait until August 2024 until it's just not a problem anymore. But for those of you who are looking to take the exam before then, rule wordings, game type, in addition to if this happens more on open-ended questions versus non-open-ended questions. Again, the list goes on. I don't want to make this or imply that this is at all exhaustive. I just want to give you ideas of what kind of patterns you want to look out for. So again, just to kind of cap this all off, this whole process is simply about figuring out how good your instincts actually are. when should you have listened to yourself? And when have you gotten questions wrong because you failed to listen to yourself? That's what we are looking for. And as you might have been guessing at this point, step 1B is going to be the opposite side of the coin, a pro-skepticism status check. And this, as I was implying just now, is the mirror opposite of the pro-instinct check. This is essentially going to check all the times your instincts led you astray. Again, to be clear, the previous slide was about, hey, when should I have listened to myself? And this slide here is going to be, hey, when should I not have listened to myself? So anytime you're down to the last few and you trusted yourself but got the wrong answer, investigate any correlation between that error and these three bullet points are going to be the same as the last slide. I just wanted to include it here just so, I don't know, you didn't have to go back and forth to do the same thing. But it's all the same stuff. Again, you're just looking for a pattern that links the times you should not have trusted yourself to any identifiable pattern that step two, practicing the changes that you require. This is where the rubber meets the road. So let's get right into it. Based on the results of steps 1A and 1B, quote unquote, all you need to do is practice switching your response to each type of scenario. And I put all in quotes, and you can't see it, but I'm also using air quotes here, gesturing to myself as I'm recording this. Um, because it's on paper it's simple, but I understand that it can be a more difficult thing, and hopefully I'll hit the biggest difficulties as we go along here. So if you can identify a pattern as to when your instincts are solid, so that's the step 1A stuff, trust yourself on those situations. Likewise, if you can identify any pattern as to when your instincts are weak and they lead you astray, the step 1B stuff, lean away from your instincts there and try to make the opposite choice. To actually practice this, I recommend doing whatever section you're doing this on. Start it timed, but as soon as you recognize these warning patterns where you're stuck between a couple answers and you recognize, wait a minute, I remember that in this particular kind of wording, like let's say it's a medical survey issue or medical research stimulus in LR, you're like, man, every time I go with my gut on this one, I get it wrong. Stop the clock. Stop the clock so you can be fully deliberate about what you're doing here. And here's kind of the first big complication with practicing change. As you practice, you might actually surprisingly quickly reach a point where you seem to be overcompensating specifically on the step 1B side. So what I mean here is that step 1B again, that's where trusting yourself was the problem and you wanted to avoid doing that, right? But instead of trusting yourself being the problem, all of a sudden in those scenarios, doubting yourself becomes a problem and you start getting questions wrong again. That's good news. If this happens, if the step 1B thing is going off the rails all of a sudden, that's good news. That means that your knowledge of the exam is increased and changed. And now you are properly recognizing correct responses the first time in a situation where you previously did not. So basically you've changed your instincts, really is what's happened. Previously, before you practiced this, your gut feeling led you to the wrong answer. And now your gut feeling has simply been updated so that now your gut is telling you, hey, the other answers are actually the right answers. And so you've basically aligned yourself with the exam and you can probably stop caring about the 1B stuff, frankly, at that point. But either way, I have seen this phenomenon happen and it's something that I just wanted to warn you guys about. And finally, step three, which you may end up skipping to if even steps 1A and B didn't work, seek assistance from a tutor. This is really just a concession to reality. If everyone could, or let's be real, actually wanted to put in all this effort to pull off steps 1 or 2 on your own, I'm sure there would not be a tutoring business for the exam. It just wouldn't happen because you could figure all this stuff out on your own, and you wouldn't need to listen to some internet stranger like me talk to you about all this stuff. If you are not able to find a pattern in steps 1A and 1B, it's possible that an experienced tutor can, or there's something else or some other angle that the tutor can help you with that may not depend on finding a pattern. Because again, if those of you guys, my target audience here is people in the mid 160s, of course, those of you who are not there yet, you're still welcome here too. I'll still talk to you. But for those of you who this is really meant for, um, if you're there, you're already dealing with single digit misses per section or per section per exam, right? So if you're looking at, PT whatever, LR section number one, and you only got, 4 to 5 questions wrong or something like that, it's going to be hard to really notice a pattern and you can go back and look at, a double digit number of exams, but who really has the time for that? There's all sorts of reasons why. you wouldn't be able to easily discern a pattern. And part of it is that if some of the exams are too fresh in your mind, it's hard to take a step back and look at it a little bit more objectively. And so, because you hear your own thoughts and you remember what you were thinking at the time, it can be hard to silence those and really look at the bigger picture. So in terms of your takeaways, it's really simple. Both steps, 1A and B here, can be collapsed into determine if there's any recognizable pattern regarding when to trust yourself and when not to trust yourself. Step 2, in semi-untimed practice, act on the patterns that you discerned in step 1. Step 3 is if steps 1 and 2 don't seem to be getting you anywhere, talk. And of course, I am a tutor. Here's my email address if you want to talk to me. But that's not really the point of this. This is really, again, in case you guys have missed sort of the various insights videos that I've said this in. It's not really about growing my tutor business, but it's really about challenging myself as an instructor. Specifically, that's why I choose to publish, right? Previously considered unpublishable advice, and maybe this all is not good enough to move into the publishable zone. But there you have it. So yeah, thanks for being here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.